Morning. It's grey, grizzly, cold, and I'm going for my first COVID jab later on this afternoon, so I'm not doing any building in the van. But I thought I'd make a video about the differences between the BM2 battery monitor, available everywhere, eBay, Amazon, etc. That's the actual unit I'm talking about. That one cost me £9 second hand. And that's the software display on my iPad and my Android phone. The Ctek unit is known as the Battery Sense, and I've got one of those in the craft here, down there. I'll say from the outset, I think this thing is inferior, not necessarily the hardware, but the software. But I've got that plugged in to the Crafter chassis battery, just so I can keep an eye on it, because I'm currently using the chassis battery to run the diesel heater, which is ticking away in the background. I don't know if that's focused or not. There's a long serial number there and a barcode. When I first bought this, I've had this unit for quite some time. The only way you could actually enter into the software, either on the Android phone or on the iPad, was to type the barcode in. Which means you've either got to take a note of it, or remember not to throw away the box, or just crawl around the floor typing it in. It's not detectable as a Bluetooth device by the application software. And I'll just put the phone down, the camera down, and switch to the Ctek software. But to effectively set up the Ctek unit, you have to go in as new sender, enter the long barcode number, or more recently the software allows you to add it by scanning the barcode. I've never tried that, I assume it works. It's a bit of a faff. You don't have to do it with the BM2 device. The BM2 device is just discoverable with the Bluetooth device. Now it's worth mentioning that both of these devices, the Ctek and the BM2, are BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy. They don't have a massive range at all. If you think you're going to sit in your house and monitor the state of the van, for example, or your batteries, you're not going to be able to do so. In clear air, maybe a range of 25-30 feet. It's not huge, but then they draw virtually zero power and obviously are designed for being connected all the time. One noticeable difference is the BM2 does not have an inline fuse in the cables. The Ctek device does have an inline fuse, and that really is perhaps the only immediate out of the box good feature about the Ctek device. It's got a fuse. These may be using fusible wire, but it feels quite thick. So I've got two of these in WAS, one monitoring the chassis battery, one monitoring the auxiliary battery. Both of them are independently fused. This is the Ctek opening menu. I've only got one device, so there's only one device here, but if there's multiple devices you better select them individually. Tapping the green battery brings up the next screen. The application is sluggish. I'm going to have to tap it several times. This won't connect because I'm in my office way away from the van, so it won't be able to connect to the sensor. By default you can see the state of charge, the voltage it was connected and the temperature it was connected, and then the three tabs below show similar information. This can be expanded by turning the device into landscape. And then you've got the voltage display over the past few days, and you'll see that the line is roughly somewhere around about 13 volts, maybe. You can't get any better detail out of that. It isn't very good. I don't like that. I want to be able to know for a given point in time what the voltage actually was for, comparison purposes. The state of charge indicator, I think it's pretty meaningless. I think it would require the battery to be fully disconnected and resting to get an accurate reading out of this. And the temperature one is just a joke. I've just touched the tab. That will take a good few seconds to even show you anything, and by default it goes and show you the entire range from October when the data was first collected. This device doesn't seem to allow you to delete data over a certain age. It's a bit annoying. There you go, October through to now. I don't particularly like that, and I don't like the interface. It's sluggish and a bit temperamental, and it doesn't provide you with any useful information for comparative purposes. The Ctek device has a settings screen. You could determine temperature, centigrade and Fahrenheit, devices, voltage. It will send you a message if it hasn't received any data. I'll turn that off because I don't connect this to the vehicles that often. And you can also send what they determine as anonymous data. You never know quite what these companies are collecting or why. So I've got that turned off. Within the application itself, you can tell it the battery capacity. That's only really relevant to the state of charge display, and I think that's only going to really work when the battery is able to rest properly in between being used. In a vehicle, the battery's always got some sort of load on it, so it's very difficult to determine an accurate state of charge. And you can have a picture. I'm not sure why. These sort of features aren't really of any real benefit. The BM2 app, very similar in the way from the Ctek one. Portrait for this screen and rotate it through the landscape for the more detailed screen. Again, I'm in my office, so this isn't connected, so it's showing you the last update for, in this particular example, the chassis battery in the Sprinter, which was last connected at 11:25 when it was showing 13.7 volts. If this was actually connected, the surround around the voltage indication would be spinning, and you'd see that orange line would be actively tracking across the screen in relation to real-time data, which visually is quite interesting. You can also see the graduations are better. It's between 13 and 15 volts instead of between 10 and 15 volts on the Ctek device. But still, there's not a great deal of data there. However, on tapping that screen, that bar graph, you switch to this screen here. This is today's data up to 11:25, and the beauty of this one is you can put your finger on it and you can view relevant, accurate information. The arrow next to the date will take you to yesterday, and you can see there that in this instance my solar panels kicked in around about 7:30 and brought the battery voltage up to the bulk and absorption stage at around about 9:30, and then the batteries switched to float. This chassis battery is charged from the solar panels via a Sterling powered device, as well as my leisure batteries, because my aim in my van is to ensure that all my batteries are healthy. And then towards the end of the day, 7 o'clock in the evening, the battery drops down to 12.8 and probably down to about 12.3 by the time solar kicks in again. Again, this is my chassis battery. There is a parasitic load on there from the alarms tracker and various other things I've got in the van. It's a much nicer interface. You can interact with it, you can get information out of it, and you can drill down into individual days. Going back to this screen, there's some icons at the bottom there. The voltage screen is what I'm looking at now. You can do a cranking test, which will give me an indication of the last cranking phase it went through. This is the last time I drove the vehicle, and you can see how long it took, roughly under 1 second, and the voltage dropped down to, what was that, 3 volts? I'm not sure if that's accurate. But the point of this is, it will give you an indication if the battery is suffering when the engine's cranking under maximum load. How accurate it is, I don't know, I don't use it, but it's there. You can also use this to check the alternator's charging properly by following the instructions. The alternator in my Sprinter isn't particularly clever, it only chucks out 14 volts, and I think it gets some weird results. And the other thing it does, based on the cranking information, it tries to determine how often, where you've driven, how long for, etc, etc, which for a chassis battery may be relatively accurate, but for a leisure battery you wouldn't have a clue what this means. But it's just got some useful features. The other feature about this particular application is its settings screen. Again, you can configure it to do alerts and alarms. You can sort of give it an idea of what you consider to be red for a battery, and orange for a battery. You know, realistically, you don't want to knock a leisure battery down to more than about 60 or 70%. So you can set your thresholds there where it will send you alarms. You can do, there's a hardware installation screen, which is basically a little how-to. You can update the firmware, and I've seen a couple of updates come along. But the most important part of this one is the Bluetooth screen. And unlike the Cteks software, this will actually discover the Bluetooth device, and you can edit them and give them labels. And as you can see, I've got 4 of them. None are connected at the moment because I'm sitting in my office. chassis and auxiliary battery in the Sprinter. I've got one in our Kia Soul, because ironically, even though it's an electric vehicle, if the 12-volt battery goes flat, which it does after about 2 weeks, you can't turn the ignition on, therefore you can't drive the car. It's pathetic. I have no idea why they do that like that, but we've been monitoring that seeing as we've been not using the car for the past while. And then the spare one is my test one that I was showing in the van earlier on today. But whichever one you connect to, you can then interact with the data in the same way as I demonstrated just now. One oddity, sometimes it loses data. See if it's there, there's nothing for the 1st of March. I think that's probably the only flaw I've found with this BM2 product and its software. Synchronises data from the device. Maybe the device only keeps 30 days. There's no time and date in it, so you'd think it'd be a consistent 30 days, but for some reason it had lost the data for the 1st of March, and then we got the information for a few previous days. Next time I connect it, it may well sync that missing information. So the data is being pulled out the device, and maybe if there's some corruption in the device, you lose it. But that's about the only flaw. But the important thing is, as I said earlier, you can get some useful information. One of the things I did use this for, and I put it in other videos, for example my fridge video, is when the fridge is operating, you can see the fridge cycling every 30 minutes overnight, for example, via this screen. You can't do that with a Ctek device. So that's an overview of the software, the BM2 software. And I think to sum up, BM2 monitor is cheaper to buy. You can get them very cheaply if you shop around. The software, in my mind, is infinitely better than the software available for the Ctek. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope this was worthwhile.